welcome. So this is the evening class, which is somewhere in the 45-minute range, so a little bit shorter. And we're gonna do a kind of slow, progressive hip opening flow. And we're gonna start laying on our back. So I've got a few props that I want. We're gonna end laying on our back too, by the way. Start and end laying on the back, but there'll be some stuff in the middle. But for the end, I have a yoga strap. And it might come in handy in the middle somewhere too, but I've got that for my ending sequence. So if you have a yoga strap, just get it and put it handy somewhere you can easily reach it from your mat. And then I also have a long pillow. I've got some extra blankets because at the very end I might want to cover up and get really toasty and warm. So I've got a big, thick, fuzzy blanket, and I've got this blanket which is a little bit, it's a little more stable, but a little smaller. I'm going to use this one underneath my legs. And because I've been working on my computer all day, I'm also going to do a little chest opening here at the beginning. It'll be like a little fish pose, and I'm going to use my pillow for that. But you could also use, if you have these instead, a yoga block or two. If you put the block down, let your shoulder blades rest on it. Some people like to let their head drop over onto the floor. I like my head supported, so if it were me, I would throw in a second yoga block for my head to land on. And I love that version. I'm just switching it up tonight and going for a pillow. So similar thing, I'm gonna lay down on this pillow so that the bottom edge of the pillow is about where my shoulder blades live. And then it's just a little softer than the block. Mostly it's the same. Okay, so you can get away with the pillow being a little bit lower or a little bit higher than the shoulder blades. Whereas with the block, because they're so firm, it really has to be placed just so. And if it feels really crummy or it feels like it's poking you in between your ribs, you'll want to adjust your position so that just the shoulder blades are riding on the block. It helps. You can squish them together and sort of rest them right up on the edge. With the pillows, it's a little bit softer. And even like a throw pillow would work here as long as you have a big enough one that your head is supported. So I'm starting with my knees open. If I bring my feet in a little closer, this gets a little more sharp in the inner thigh and hip area. If I drift my feet out a little bit, there's a little less sensation there. And it's a little bit more of a back bend because it sort of pulls the pelvis into a little more of a tilt. I'm trying to find the exact middle ground. So I have just the barest sensation of my pelvis in this back bendy shape, and also a little love for my hips. Not too much in either direction. I'm looking for the spot that Goldilocks would have been into. Not too much, not too little. Just right. Letting myself just relax and breathe. At this point, we're just going to let the mind unwind. And I'm sort of starting at the top of my head with my mental awareness and just sort of letting it come down through my whole body, progressively relaxing as I go. So I'm gonna stay for about another 5 breaths or so, about 30 more seconds. Now, if the inner thigh feels really vulnerable, you can take your hands and sort of give yourself a little extra support as you bring the legs together. And then I'm gonna slide the blanket out. Now I'm not going anywhere with the pillow just yet because I'm gonna let myself, you can leave the feet resting on the floor, you can stretch those legs all the way out. I'm gonna essentially just let myself have a little bit more of this back bendy, upside down cobra / fish pose shape. I'm letting my arms kind of slowly drop back. So the early part of this pose was all about the front of my shoulder. Now I'm letting the back part of my arm traction just a little bit here. Just again to release some tension from both sides of my shoulder girdle. And then I'm gonna come off of the pillow by kind of pushing myself over and sliding it out from under me. All right, now I'm coming back onto my back. We're gonna do a bunch of little somatic hip flowy things. But before we get to those, if you like, you can do one of my favorite ones, which is this kind of progressive windshield wipers. So my feet are pretty close together, maybe hips distance apart at the most. And then I start with just windshield wipering the knees back and forth. Just swish, swish. And then I've just gently widened the feet apart a little bit. And I'll do another set. And then widen them apart a little bit. And another set. And I'm just creeping my feet out wide. Now, with a more traditional yoga mat, like a rectangular yoga mat, I usually stop about the edges of the mat, like when my toes find the edges. With this mat, I don't have a stop. It gets wider than I can go. So just right about the thing where I feel like that's probably good. Is where I stop here. And I've just about reached that point. And I'm letting my hip lift all the way off the floor. There's space underneath my whole pelvis when I get to these edges. But it gives me a nice little internal rotation at the hip. It feels really good. All right, so then I'll just kind of bring myself back to this little constructive rest position. Now, constructive rest is a great position for releasing the hip flexors. That's what it's designed to do. So what happens with this pose is the femur bone, the large thigh bone, drops into the socket enough that the attachment that goes around and wraps to the lesser trochanter, this little knob on the femur bone, is able to release a little bit into the hip so it doesn't pull on the system. So you know you've got it right when there's no sense that your low back is being arched up, right? So I've gotten my rib cage is touching the floor. There's a little curve under the low back, like little tiny baby mice could probably fit under there, but there's not a big, a guinea pig sized tunnel. It's the rib cage doesn't feel like it's being manipulated in any way. It's pretty neutral. And the femur bones kind of feel nice and heavy in the hip socket. And you may have to jiggle around to find it, like your feet might have to get closer together. They might need to be a little wider apart. You might need to have the feet further out or further in. You just have to find it, because everybody's bone structure is a little different. Like if your femur bone and your shin bones have different lengths, your feet are gonna wind up in slightly different places compared to someone else. So once you find that sense that the pelvis is neutral, that the rib cage is neutral, the spine is not in any way being sort of torqued in any direction other than its neutral position, which is, everybody's slightly different on that front too, then that's the beginning place. And we're gonna leave this left leg alone, and we're gonna play with this right leg. Okay, so we're gonna start with just the leg, and then we'll add some upper body to it. So I'm gonna try to keep my torso pretty much stable, my left leg exactly where it is, and just the right leg is gonna move and I want to move as smoothly as possible. So if your mat is super sticky and you can get onto a surface that isn't as sticky, you can do it that way. You could also stick, like put a sock on or something like that. You're just going to work your best to make this glide as even and as relaxed as possible. So I've got my toes in the air. That helps because the only thing touching the ground now is the bottom of my heel. I'm going to slide my leg out as easygoing as I can slide it. Toes are still pointing up. And then I'm going to reach, and I'm trying to reach all the way from where the hip flexor attaches, which is cut somewhere up here near the diaphragm on the bottom of the bottom half of my torso, reaching all the way out through the foot. And then I'm just going to glide that leg back into place as best I can without disturbing the rest of my body. Things are going to get disturbed. This is a deep, long muscle. It connects everything in the body to everything else, basically. All the important bits anyway. But I'm going to do the best job I can. Stretching out through that whole leg, feeling it go all the way from above the belly button and back. And as best I can, kind of working with the lumps in the mat. Reach it out. Stretch out and then bring it back in. And again, just as relaxed as possible so that I don't have to do too much work with the rest of my body. One more like that. Just stretch it out. Now we're going to add a little bit of abdominal work, and we're actually going to add some moves that strengthen this. So this move that we've been doing is mostly a release. It helps to release tension and pressure from this big hip flexor muscle, the psoas, and its little friend that lives in the hip itself, the iliacus. In any case, I've got my hands behind my head, so I'm going to do the same initial move. I'm going to stretch my leg out. Stretch right there. This is the most important part, is where I'm pulling that muscle out as long as I can. And now picking the knee up, I'm going to curl up toward it using my abdominal muscles, not my neck. So foot comes down, same thing, slide it out. Stretch through the leg, bring it in. Bring the foot to the ground, slide it out. Stretch through it, bring it in. Now, we're going to change the movement. We're going to do a rotation to the outside. So I'm going to stretch the leg out, same way I just did, then rotate the leg so that I've got the toes pointing towards the right. And then curl in, leaving that external rotation. When the foot comes down, I'm going to leave the toes pointing straight up as I glide out and stretch. Continue the stretch with the rotation, then bring the knee in. And then one more time like that. Stretching the leg out, toes pointing up. Rotate, bring it in. Now we're going to do an internal rotation, so 3 rounds of this. So the leg is going to stretch out. We're going to rotate it inward at the end of that stretch there, then bring the knee across the body and twist a little bit toward it with the left elbow. So out with the toes up. Rotate that knee inward, bring it across, and then one more like that. Out, rotate it inward, bring it across. Okay, so I'm done for now with this right leg. I'm just going to extend the leg out and do this little back and forth, external to internal rotation shimmy. And it's just a quick... I'm trying to get like a little sense of shake, 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 shake to move through the whole body. And then I'm going to glide that foot back into place and pause. And in the pause, I just want to notice how things have gone. So I'm feeling this whole hemisphere of my body. And again, I'm using my fingers and indicating the top front of the body, but what I'm really sensing is almost like the bowl on the back of my, on my back body. So if my rib cage and my hips, if I took the top off and took all the organs out, I would be left with this little cavity, this bowl essentially, and that's the part that I'm trying to sense, is the inner rim of the pelvis, the inner rim around my hips and ribs. So that's where all these muscles attach, is in that back part of the body under the internal organs. It's not an area I spend a lot of time feeling, you know. Normally it's like fingertips and skin is where most of my sensory data comes from. Okay. So the other thing that I can do to just sense whether any change has been made is I can notice the actual tendon that is attached here. And on my left side, I can almost play this tendon like a guitar string. It's right at the surface, and I can like kind of catch hold of it with my thumb, with my fingertip. Whereas on this side, I cannot find that tendon without really digging. So the muscle is released enough that the tendon that goes over the top of the pubic bone has receded back in. So that's another little indication for me that something nice has happened on my right side. And so again, if the sensory data of feeling deep into the body isn't really there, you can also notice, like, do I have a difference in the way that tendon is currently positioned in my body? So I'm going to leave the right leg just like it is. I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. Hopefully I haven't lectured too much. So I think it's helpful to like feel these things in your body so that when you're going about life, you've got some information. So just the first part of this, toes are up. I'm going to glide this leg out. And again, I'm going for the most smooth I can move. I may not move all that smooth, but as best I can, stretching this whole line all the way through and then dragging it back. Now on this side, I feel a little bit of resistance on the back of my knee. So I'm just noticing that, stretching out, and I might leave my knees slightly bent or just adjust my quadriceps a little bit to help protect my knee, and then glide back in. It's a little tricky because the quads are secondary hip flexors, but I'm just going to try to do a balance of it. Reaching and stretching out and not hyperextending my knee joint. Okay, so I'm going to do that one more time. Just the leg, just feeling the length. I'm trying to see if I can feel where the tension might be coming from on this side. Is it up higher in the muscle? Is it down closer to the hip? Sometimes I can tell. Okay, so then I'm going to do those same little strengthening moves. So stretching it out first, feeling that length happen. Coming straight down the center, curling up toward it. Heavy foot, stretch out, curl up. Again, I want to be careful not to use my neck here. I'm using the abdominals to flex the spine. Reach out, curl up. Okay, now the external rotation. Reaching out, turning that leg so that the toes point to the left, and then bringing it back in. Foot straight up and down for the first part, stretch out. Keep stretching with the rotation, bring it in. And then one more time, stretching out. Stretch with the rotation, bring it in. So then we'll do the internal rotation. So stretching out, rotating in, coming across, stretching out, rotating in, coming across. One more time, stretching out, rotating in, coming across. Okay, so one more time I'm going to stretch that leg all the way out and give it this little sort of shimmy. I want to let the rest of the body relax so much that it just feels like I'm shaking it. And I'm just moving through the internal, external rotation. That's the movement pattern. But rhythmic enough to get a shake or a shimmy going. And then drag it back. And pause for a second and let the body respond. Because there might be, these are deep muscles, there might be like a little bit of a tension that you feel at first. And then as you pause, you can feel it a little bit loose, deeper, a little looser. And so I just took my thumb to that same hip and I cannot find that tendon without digging in there really deep. It's not prominent like it was before. So it tells me that I've done something and it feels better, so that's nice. Alrighty, so that is the basics of what we're gonna do. We're gonna give ourselves a little stretch and a twist to end this little sequence, and then we'll come up to all fours, but let's do a twist first because it feels really nice. So I'm gonna use a pillow, and I'm gonna drape my legs over the pillow, and then take this top leg and kind of wrap it a little bit like an eagle pose. I'm not gonna hook it under my calf, but close. And then I'm gonna stretch out through this arm. So this stretches my outer hip, but also my pec here on the chest. So you just kind of find the right amount for you. Hello, pumpkin. How are you? How are you? And I'm trying to send this hip just a little bit farther away from my rib cage. Do 2 more breaths. All right, so taking this top leg to come back, I'm going to pause there, give this side a little bit of a shimmy, do my favorite little windshield wipery leg things, and then we're going to do the other side. I'm not quite there yet. There's a point where I feel my spine kind of relax, and I'm looking for that, feeling for that response. And then taking the legs over and wrapping them around like an eagle pose. Trying to find my way here. And then, get that nice stretch through the right chest muscle. And again, I'm sort of actively drawing my right hip just a little further away from the bottom of my right rib cage. Just with the twist in the legs, it kind of gives me a little bit of leverage to move this top leg, top hip. So I'm aiming in that direction. Spend just a couple more breaths here. And then coming on back, and giving myself just a little bit of a moment to rinse out. Okay, so we're gonna meet up on all fours, and you can take whatever time you need to get to that position. And once you get there, you can do some cat shapes. Now, I'm also doing these little side wandery snake things. So, rounding up to get the low back kind of change shape, flexing or extending the spine is meant to move, mostly the upper back curve and the lower back curve. But then if I curl around to the side, that sort of gives the side of the ribs, and again, the same sort of hip flexor area we've been working on, a little extra length as well. So kind of moving my spine more to neutral, and then doing these little side winders. Okay, so I'm going to take this right leg back, press back through the toes, roll over the top of the foot, and then roll back. Just doing that because it feels nice in the toes. So if it doesn't feel nice to you, don't keep doing it. I love the way that feels. And then I'm I'm gonna lift that leg up, take a little moment and curl it in. Now you can add the arm if you like as well. Bring both in, stretch it out, bring it in. Okay, I'm gonna bring this right leg all the way forward, which puts me in a lunge. Now I'm gonna play with this lunge, so I'm gonna use 2 blocks to start with. So, the blocks just give me a little something to lean into as I move this back and forth. So I'm gonna start with my chest sort of aligned with my thigh. So the blocks just give me something to lean my hands into as I move back and forth. Okay, so now I'm gonna take both hands to a little bit more of the diagonal. So as I bring the hip forward and then stretch back and bow in, I'm gonna use the blocks just to maintain that stability. This is a little bit more precarious feeling to me, so I move very carefully. All right. Now I'm gonna send my weight forward into the lunge. I'm gonna see where I want to land. So I could come up a little bit more, right? Lifting, or if it seems interesting, kind of maintaining this diagonal might be more interesting. Bringing the hip forward, so more of a kind of lizard, somewhere in between might be better. Also a little more of the lizard. So you might choose one or the other. I'm gonna do about 3 more breaths. And backing things up, nice and slow. And then I'm gonna take this leg back, give it a little bit of a shimmy, and bring it down. Now, taking a wide-kneed child's pose, and feeling both hips. And see if there's a difference, and if the difference is pleasant or unpleasant. Before I do the other side, if I just, am on a path to wreck myself, I want to know that. So it feels pretty good, so I'm gonna try it again, but it's good to know. It's good to check oneself before. Okay, so some cats. And some little sidewinders. And some cats. And little sidewinders. Okay, so coming to the center, I'm going to take that left leg, tuck the toes under, reach back through the foot, roll forward and back, forward and back. That leg up, and again bring the knee in, and I can just do the knee or add the opposite arm. Stretch out, curl in one more time, but this time I'm bringing that leg all the way forward, and again I'm going to play with this lunge. So I'm starting really carefully, just feeling out where the lunge begins. And moving back and forth a couple times. So come in a little bit more to this diagonal. Let's see where that takes me. And then I'm going to choose a lunge that seems interesting to move into. And again, you might choose a lifted lunge rather than this kind of lower down lizardy lunge. do 2 more breaths. And then I'm taking it back ever so slowly into a little hamstring stretch here. And come back to that wide knee child's pose. I'm going to leave these blocks here just in case I want them for later. I'm going to inch myself into a little upper back stretch. I'm going to start by just changing the elevation of my arms. So bringing my elbows together, keeping myself back into this little child's pose, and resting one elbow on each block. I get a little extra stretch through my triceps. If that's enough, I don't have to do anything more. You can certainly stack it higher and even move forward with your hips to get a little deeper stretch in your back. This feels pretty good. I'm going to hang with it. All right. So coming out of there, I'm going to let myself sort of find a little bit of movement. So if you want to do a downward dog or something along that line, this is your chance. Because we're going back onto our back for the last part of this sequence. Oh. So I'm going to need a strap. And I'm also going to use a pillow, and I'm going to use this blanket for my head. So, getting all of that settled. Oh, and then roll it back onto my back. Oh, that. All right. Now, the last bit of this is this little stretching sequence with the strap and the leg. It's one of my favorites. I am gonna do 2 poses on one side, then we'll do 2 poses on the other side. I'm gonna probably move a little bit just to make enough room for myself. So starting with the foot sort of lassoed in, I'm gonna extend the leg out. Now, if you don't have a yoga strap, you can wrap a towel around your foot or just hold onto your big toe. I like the strap because if I put it underneath my back, so the tail comes out on the, like around my waist on the opposite side, it lets me do this mostly hands-free. If I want to hold on with my hand, I can, but I can also do this without. And it feels nice to just let the upper body relax. I can position the shoulder so that the strap kind of aids in releasing the shoulder a little bit as well. So pressing a little bit into the foot. If I bend my knee and give it a jiggle, things change. If I pull my toes down and really press my heel away, that changes the way it feels in my calf. And also apparently the quality of my voice. So wherever you might land here. So we'll stay for a bit, about another 5 breaths. Okay, so I'm gonna take a nice big breath. I've got a pillow here really close to my hip so that it gives me a little bit of support. My inner thigh is just a tiny bit more sensitive than my hamstring area. Sometimes bending the knee is helpful here. A straighter leg might be better for you. For me, a little bit of a bend in the knee puts most of the stretch right in the center of the muscle and keeps it away from my groin and my knee. The straighter my leg is, the more I feel the attachment point right through the knee joint right there. So it just depends on the day and how things are going as to which direction I go in. You can rotate the thigh a little out or a little in. I don't have quite as much rotation with the leg in this position as I do with the leg straight up and down, but I have a little bit of movement. I'm letting the left side stay nice and heavy for now. About 5 more breaths. All right, coming out back to the center, bending my knee and sliding the strap off. Okay, so before I do the other side, I'm just gonna pause back in that little constructive rest position and do the barest little babiest of back and forth. And then I'm gonna push the feet out a little bit and do just the barest little baby windshield wiper. And then once I get the legs all the way straight, I'm just gonna check in with the right side and the left side. And see again if there's a little difference in the way they feel and whether the right side feels good and I should do the left side just like that, or if the right side is giving me a warning that I should pay attention to. Now I need to bring myself slightly to the diagonal so I won't smack into plants. It feels pretty good, so I'm gonna go with it on this other side. Oops. In the appropriate amount of hamstring stretch here. And then once I've got that kind of working with it, a little bit of external and internal rotation, pressing the heel up or pointing the toes a little bit more to take away some of the pressure from the calf muscles. Then I just do a slow kind of interplay between those options. Try not to be too fidgety, just feeling how the different options sort of impact the shape. And letting the right side stay nice and soft and relaxed. Okay, so I'm going to take 2 more breaths and then take the leg out to the side. So now just looking for the appropriate amount of stretch on the inner thigh. And, you know, really just because this area of tissue is crazy big, considering that the femur bone is maybe like an inch or so in diameter, and there's all this muscle in this area. This is a huge area of muscle, really interestingly shaped, large muscle mass. So trying to sort of find like all the little nuances of that muscle mass takes just, it's an interesting exploration. I mean, the femur might be a little bit bigger, but right in the center, probably not that much bigger. Oh, mostly there's just a lot of muscle in there. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying, yogis. It's kind of interesting to test out slightly different angles, slightly different amounts of pressure, just to see how the muscle responds. So about 5 or 6 more breaths. Settled into this really yummy place. I'm going to do one more breath while I'm here. And then again, I'm just going to bring it all back. And really slowly transition. And again, just letting everything be really gentle. Now I'm heading towards a final relaxation. So I am putting a pillow underneath my legs because that makes my low back happy. And I'm taking this gigantic fuzzy blanket and I'm putting it over top of my body. So that when I get myself all stretched out here, it is delightful and toasty and nice. I've made my pillow just a tiny bit thicker for my head. So you have to fiddle with things, but once you get it all fiddled around so that it's just right, we're going to let ourselves relax. Trying to bring the most sort of soft sense to the pelvis, and kind of the whole kind of low belly, just below the belly button, down to the pubic bone, that whole region, just trying to let it sink back into the bowl of the pelvis. I just did all kinds of work to get the hip flexors out of my way there. And so trying to relax as best I can. And notice how it impacts me. You know, the body is not completely separate from our mental and emotional state. Notice if having released the hips makes any impact on the rest of you. Physically, mentally, or emotionally. If there's some old trauma there, it can bring up some tears, things like that. Maybe let that be kind of an opportunity to wash it clean. yogis, we're going to just take a moment to notice the breath. See if you can feel the breath all the way down to the tips of your toes. Our bodies are largely made of water. So the breath does kind of create a little ripple that you can sense, and maybe not to the toes, but maybe to the fingertips. See if you can feel that sort of ebb and flow sensation through the body. Almost this kind of wave action, sending signals out and back in. So just take a really deep breath and then let it go. And then you can stretch and wiggle. Now, we are eventually going to come to a seated position. Eventually. So thanks for joining me on a little kind of somatic, flowy journey into the hips. Let's take a nice big breath together. Big inhale. A big sigh. Namaste, yogis.